Well, we're getting to be a regular thing, Scott. Wednesday morning seems to be working out okay. And I understand you've got some exciting things that are happening in the world of rocketry before we get to the world of the Optimus bots.
Yes. So if no one was paying close attention, we've got a potential launch date for IFT3, and that is probably Pi Day. And most of you may not know what Pi Day is, but it's 3/14, so the 14th of March. So that is what they refer to as NET, March 14th, which means not earlier than. And it's been a date that they've had internally. They just haven't publicly announced. And I think they may have accidentally announced it
Oh,
because
really?
there was a post yesterday about, kind of setting up the live stream for it, in which it had right there, 7:30 a.m., March 14th. And I
Right,
believe that's 7:30 a.m. Central time. So that would be like
right,
the
right.
Texas time zone. And that's when the live stream starts. So, maybe the launch is at 8, 8:30, something like that. So that basically is like a week from tomorrow is what we're
Yeah.
looking at. So a lot of people were thinking it was going to be the 8th. It clearly looked like it wasn't going to be the 8th. So that's the earliest, and it can obviously slip, but that information got out, and I think I actually posted it before everyone else did. And then everyone else suddenly says, "Hey, wait a minute! It looks like it's actually going to be Pi Day." So yeah, keep an eye on it.
Good.
If you're one of those people that actually wants to go see it, well, now you get an idea of it's a good day to start planning your trip. But it could slip, to a couple days after or something like that. But I think if you're willing to go down there and hang out for a week, there's a good chance you'll see something. In
Is a
worst case, what you'll see is a tanking and a detanking, like I did on the first one. But still, it's impressive to go down there and see it stacked. So
sure, sure,
yeah,
sure.
don't miss that
Absolutely.
opportunity.
So are you going?
It unfortunately is a bit complicated because family is coming into town right at that time again.
Ah,
So it happened the last time too. So it's
oh
like
no.
that's probably how I had a pretty good idea. Oh, I bet it's on this date. So
Well, if we could have it slip 2 days, we could have it go on my birthday. So that would be, I mean, Pi
two
Day is
days. Oh, so
yeah,
you're on St. Uro's Day.
Saint Uro's. No, I didn't know about Saint Uro.
That's the 16th, right?
16th. Yeah, yeah.
That's St. Uro's Day. That's the
Saint.
day before St. Patrick's Day. It's
Okay.
it's it's a it's a Finnish holiday. Well, actually, it's not a Finnish holiday. It's a Finnish American holiday
I see.
that the Finns that came to the Midwest, I think up and around, I'm not sure if it was Minnesota or Wisconsin, somewhere along there, were jealous of the St. Patrick's Day parade, so they decided to create their own.
I
And the
see.
myth is like Saint Uro, and Uro is kind of a common last name, and even a first name in Finland.
I see.
Uh, and that's the and it was about the Saint Uro driving the frogs out of Finland. And like there are
Oh,
frogs in Finland, don't worry, there's plenty there. But there's like no snakes in Ireland, right? And
right,
the whole
right, right,
idea is
right,
that
right,
St. Patrick drove them off the island.
right, right.
So it's a just kind of clever marketing that came up. It was so clever that it's only like known in that region,
It's just yeah.
and even the Finns aren't aware of it. So you go over to Finland and say, "Oh, today's it," and they go, "What are you talking about?" And then you like show it to them, and they go, "Oh, okay, there's a
Well,
Wikipedia about it."
now
So
that
there
it's
you go.
now that it's been on this channel, it'll become a big deal.
Well, see, the whole idea was that by having it on the 16th, um, the Finns would get to drink all the whiskey before
I
the
see
Irish have
before
a
that.
chance. So there was nothing ready for St. Patrick's Day, nothing left over.
Okay, well, let's turn to the robot then. Let's turn to
Mhm.
Optimus. And
Yep.
last week, it turned out that right after you and I talked about speed, I mean, it was I think the same day, we had so
Unitary.
I
Yeah.
can't keep
Yeah.
track of all the names because I can't even keep track of my 9 grandchildren's names. So this was which one of them came out with their
Okay. So,
human
so,
speed?
so yeah, the past couple of weeks have been pretty busy with a lot of news on the humanoid bot front. This week's actually been very slow.
Yeah,
And most of the announcements that have come out this week are more or less about what's been happening in China as opposed to the US. So there haven't been any like blockbuster funding rounds or any, new videos. But, each week there was something coming out, or each day, as to say, last week there was something coming out. And towards the tail end of the week, a Unitary, which we've been tracking. We know that they have the H1 bots been out there for a while. They also have like a dog bot that you can buy that's very similar to the Boston Dynamics one. So they've been around for a while. They're legitimate. They're selling these products and they're being used. And I believe that they have some sort of technological cooperation with ETH and Zurich, which has worked on the walking policies for these various kinds of bots. And that would explain why they've been able to come up with what they are, but it's pretty good claim of sort of like a world walking record for a full humanoid bot.
Right.
Now, it's not the world record for a bipedal bot. That's still held by Oregon State University, but that was just the legs. It had like no upper body, didn't have a torso.
Okay.
Now, some people might say that, yeah, but this H1 bot doesn't have fully formed hands either, but it has arms, has a torso, has a head, and it's going about a little over 7 miles per hour, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So that's not, I mean, that's like twice the speed that you need, more than twice the speed. So if it really can do that, and they've taken some interesting approaches. I'm trying to understand enough of what's going on. Like they don't have their feet are more spiky toes and heels, which is rather interesting. So they're more or less like a ballerina balancing on their toes rather than, so they have a very arched foot. And deciding that is kind of the contact points they want to have, which may actually be a clever solution because it looks like they can pivot on that pretty well and do some other things. And as a result of that, they don't care about this motion of the foot. They only care about the pitching motion. So everyone else has 2 degrees of freedom to get the kind of that. And there's like, well, wait a minute. If we have like a ball for our front toe and a ball for, we don't really care where you come down. Yeah. We'll just sort of go ahead and measure that. So that seems to be kind of a unique approach to building that foot. And I wasn't quite sure about that, but it says they have like 5 degrees of freedom in the leg. I'm like, well, 5, everyone has got 6. So which one did they take away? And I think it's like they took one away at the ankle, and it would make sense because of the way they decided to form the foot there. So that's a unique approach that is coming from Unitree. And they showed not only walking fast, but, going upstairs and turning around and then not falling over. I mean, having these things that most of us would stumble on stairs. So it turns around the stairs, goes down, and its heel catches on the stair behind it. For most of us, you do something like that, you put that down and you're like, whoa, I'm expecting that you tumble over. And it's just like, nah, not phased. So it shows that the control algorithm is really able to respond very quickly to uneven terrain quite well. And they've been working a lot on that. And they showed a very simple demonstration of using the dogbot to bring up a basket of goods that the robot was able to come up and do this because it doesn't have hands. It just has balls on the wrist. To be able to kind of pick it up and bring it over to the table. So, and that could all have been heuristically done as far as sort of programming that aspect of it. So we don't know enough about how end-to-end it is, and that they've been putting a lot of work on walking. Now, as far as this week, I say there hasn't been a whole lot of announcements.
Okay, but just to finish off my concept there. So basically, our conversation last week was what will it take to get up to human speed? This was the walk, just the walk aspect. They got up to human speed. And so clearly with
we're seeing one approach that's been taken.
Mechanically it can be done. Okay.
Yeah, and it's doing it. And it might be that you take a slightly different approach on how the foot's done. Everyone's thinking you got to have an arch foot with flex and all this other stuff, and maybe they're so everyone's going to be looking at it. I'm not quite sure how they were able to get the speed. Maybe it's just that they decided to finally crank it up and see what they could do on that.
Now we also. Didn't we also have another video where we showed the sorting speed at human level?
Yes. That was last week. That was Sanctuary showing that they can have an AI which is able to move the sorting at the same rate that you would do for human. Agility also showed an application where they're around 75% of where the human can do it. And again, it comes down to not being able to pivot enough. And as far as this week, like I say, it's been kind of slow. Monday, the main announcement was that that Agility announced that they have a new CEO, Peggy Johnson, who is a heavy hitter to have in there. So they've got a pretty good front office. I mean, they've acquired a lot of talent, and there's you need 2 things to be acquired talent. Not just kind of funding, but the vision. They want to come and work there. So that means Agility is taking the space very seriously. It means they're realizing that this technology is not some crazy little thing that is going to be a blemish on my record. I was like, I'm going to go work for this company because I see that as something else. So I think, again, that's kind of validating the whole human bot area. Figured just they updated their website, and I think they basically took some old videos and spliced them together to have one kind of long video showing a bunch of other things. So not any real new news coming out of there. But the other big news has been we've been discovering more and more companies out of China have been announcing that they're forming some sort of humanoid bots. And and I'm losing track of it. So Cern is trying to keep up with that, and it's like, oh, found another one, up on another. Oh, they did another announcement, and just following up on what Unitree did with their H1 is that it's already made it to American shores
Oh,
because there was a video yesterday that was showing it walking around the campus of the University of San Diego. So you could potentially go down there if you wanted to and take a look at it. And
huh.
so some of the graduate students down there have their hands on one, and it was like walking through the park, which means like through a wooded area, and doing a pretty good job. Now they found some funny shoes to put on this thing, because I said it has like really strange kind of foot, and it did okay for like I think the video was like maybe 3 or 5 minute video or something like that, and going through, and it didn't stumble and fall, and it wasn't on any lanyards or anything else. So there's a good chance it could have gone down. And I'm not sure if they were giving it a path or just said, just go for a walk in the woods. And it's like avoiding trees and making sure it didn't go into it. It's like, okay, so this thing can walk. And so that's like the other. Now you might be saying, well, wait a minute. So they're already out here. It's like, yes. My understanding is they're selling them for around 90,000 or more, somewhere in there, depending on the configuration, for researchers. So that was the whole thing. So obviously the university said, hey, this is a great research platform. We'll buy one. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're already starting to sell them. Not necessarily it means that they're ready to do full work, but they want researchers to get their hands on it, maybe to start developing applications and all. So again, they've been doing it. And then there was another company that just never heard of called PND Botics. And they actually wrote a paper that ended up on the archive that was sort of describing the humanoid bot that they've been working on. It's kind of unusual because usually we see a video first and no one publishes anything with specs or anything like that. And so it was like really interesting to say, wow, there's a lot of detail in here about how they did it. And they had also a YouTube video to go along with it. And what I like about it is that they changed a few things in kind of the design. They're taking a good approach that looks like they studied what everyone is doing. They learned why they're doing certain aspects, and they improved upon them and tweaked a few things. So they added like angles to the shoulders. I've been talking the longest time, when you mount on the shoulders, I want to see at least a 20-degree angle. Lo and behold,
Yeah.
they got a 20-degree angle there on the way they mounted it, and a little bit of an offset. It's like, oh, okay. So they understand the reason for doing that. They also did something very interesting down the pelvis, which is making the pivot point for the legs a lot higher. Because the one thing that people probably notice from Optimus is the legs pivot pretty low down. I mean, like actually below the hips, not where you normally would expect it to be, just because the way the mechanism is designed.
Sure.
So it has very short legs. And there's one disadvantage of short legs is that it limits your stride length.
Okay.
And if you limit your stride length, you're going to limit your speed. So the bigger the stride length, the better. So they changed the design of their pelvis, and it also did something weird is they mounted it at like a 35-degree angle rather than being horizontal like this. They went down 35 degrees. And to me, it's like, wow, that's a crazy thing, because the way those motors are there, when your legs swing, the feet will kind of swing in and out when you do it. That's why you want to have them parallel like that, or parallel to the horizon, is that when your legs swing, they're going to go this way. But if you mount it this way, then as you swing, your foot is going to like kind of go in and out, in and out. So that means you need a second joint that compensates for that, and they have to work in concert. And of course, there is a second joint because there has to be, because you need the full 3D freedom. But what it means is that second joint is working harder than it normally would for that working stride in there. And that might be, they decide, hey, that's okay. They probably done something to decide that we're willing to deal with that. And they also did something interesting in their foot. They have a split-toed foot, so basically two big toes that I suspect are there to help them get the centering for the balance, and maybe just a little bit of extra effort, but it seems like it's good balance. It's able to kind of hop a little bit, skip hop. I think it's skipping kind of funny, and I think it's because its legs are kind of like going to the side again because of that reason. But it's a unique design, and so I'm going to follow these guys, because I think they're not copying. They absolutely aren't. What they're doing, what you're supposed to do as a researcher, is you survey all the papers, you survey what everyone else is doing, you analyze what's going, and from your analysis, you come up with something that looks like a unique or better design. And they've done some of that, and I can see some pedigree in there. So what they did down in the ankles is they actually looked a little bit at what Agility is doing with theirs and improved upon that design. So it's pretty clear they've got some unique things in the foot. Again, what they decided to do up with the pelvis is quite interesting. That could mean that they will get a decent walking speed. And then I think there's like two other companies that we'd never heard of, it also popping up here and there. So
Yeah,
And
well, we're
that's, I think,
getting
the big news is that the Chinese market is taking this very seriously.
seriously. Yeah, yeah,
So they're taking the directive from the government, the incentives that go there. And we do the same things in this country at times, a little bit differently, but like the DARPA challenge was all about kind of kickstarting that. And a
right.
lot of people feel that the humanoid bots that we have has kind of come directly back from the DARPA challenge, and the fact that a lot of universities were involved and researchers and papers were done. The thing is, that was such a long time ago that the effect of that is waning. And now there has to be sort of like a second kind of follow-up to that to get everyone inspired and thinking about it. Otherwise, yeah, there's going to be really only one country that will be dominating in it if some of the other countries don't begin to wake up and realize that it's a real thing. It's also, my feeling is this is what happens when a country graduates 10 times more engineers than the US. I mean,
You
there's
have 10
just
times, you have 10,
10 times more. Yes.
yeah.
And the problem you'll have here is that everyone is saying that, well, there's only going to be so much, capital in the terms of funding that these robot companies will be able to raise. I'm like,
No.
no, there's so much money sitting in the pot on the sidelines that if you've got a good idea and you announce something, you will easily attract it. I mean, there's Figure was oversubscribed for a reason. There are others are getting ready, and I'm hearing rumors that there may also be oversubscriptions going on in some of these others. So there is money going there. The problem with that is the money has to buy stuff, right? That's totally it. And if you have a shortage of the actual talent, money can't make up for that. So
Right,
we've got a
right.
limited talent pool, and what it's going to come down to, it's going to be a bidding war to get the best engineers to come over and start working on it. And those that already have the experience, or those that maybe don't have the experience, but they're well educated and they're adaptable, and they're either going to go to Meta to work on uploading cat videos more efficiently, or they're going to work on a humanoid bot project. It's going to be one of those kind of things. So
Oh,
so yeah, we'll see. I mean, that's what happens is,
yeah.
and if we don't have enough already here in this country, then we have to start thinking of like, well, how do we persuade some of that talent to actually come here? And that is like, work in the H-1B process, will you? I mean,
But, or they
20,
just, they say there's a lot
yeah.
more Chinese coming over the border from Mexico. So maybe those are engineers. Maybe
Yeah, well, I don't know, but the thing is we have a lot of foreign students that are in this country that are being
yes,
educated in this country that would like to stay in this country,
right. No,
but
I get your point.
because of that, suddenly it's like, well, wait a minute. It's like they've been basically using our resources to get the education that they need, because unfortunately, the American kids would rather go and get an MBA than work hard in an engineering degree, which is like the engineering school's like, well, how are we going to fill these empty seats? So that's why they're looking abroad. So
Sure.
you've got to sort of change that dynamic that we got to build local talent.
Speaking
And part of it is making sure we have the universities, that we encourage more local talent to go and pursue these degrees. We've got to make it interesting. That's one of the, people keep on saying, what's going to be Elon's legacy? And my feeling, his legacy is going to be, he's making the idea of becoming an engineer again something people want to pursue. That's his real legacy more than anything else. He's inspired a generation to say, hey, instead of going for that MBA, maybe I'm going to actually go for that master's of engineering, or maybe I'll become an engineer, or this looks interesting to work in this, or hey, manufacturing is interesting. It's not dull and boring like everyone thinks. It's like, man, there's some cool stuff going on there. Now, not only you're playing with robots and 3D printers and like all this other stuff. So you begin to see that. And now that changes the mindset of a lot of people. And they think, what should what kind of career should I do? It's like, do something it's going to be exciting. It's going to really change the world. And yeah, hopefully that does it. And we need to take kind of a Sputnik mentality right now of realizing that, well, we've got to up the ante, because there's a lot of problems and challenges that need to be solved. And a lot of that's just going to be solved by, good engineering.
Yeah, and the leadership isn't coming from Washington, so the leadership is coming from the citizen. So that's good.
Yes.
He's leading in so many different directions. So
Yes.
Boston Dynamics finally showed us a hand. So they should get should we clap?
Oh, wait a minute. That was old news, wasn't it? That's like a couple weeks ago, or did they show us a new hand?
I don't know. I
Is
saw
that, you're talking about the three-fingered hand that came up with?
five-fingered hand. I thought that was around Monday, maybe it was Sunday.
Oh, really? Really? Okay,
Yeah.
man. I've been flooded with so much stuff. I can't believe. So if you get, I mean, send, because they had like this weird three-fingered hand that they were using for picking up the struts and moving around. wasn't
Yeah.
even, it's like, you got to get, once you get a real human hand. So maybe they have, so that if they have,
Well,
good for them. But
I'll,
I'm
yeah.
still wondering whether they are just a research organization or how serious they are to be able to do this. If they're working on that, I almost wonder whether they've been doing something in the background and not telling everyone that's like a complete redesign
Well,
of the bot.
you did watch the Lex Friedman interview
Mhm.
with their president, who says that he is now stepped down, and he's in part. They have a new division. It's an AI division, or maybe a completely different
Mhm.
company. I wasn't clear about that, but he's now working on the end-to-end solution. So I'm
Mhm.
guessing that obviously those two are working in tandem. So it may be that that will be the way that they make this transition into
Yes,
creating something
yes.
that's
Yeah. And they need to come up with a completely new platform. Atlas was a good development tool, but they need to come up with the next generation of that, and they need to make it fully electromechanical.
and easy to
Uh,
do, easy to make.
yeah. I just don't see the hydraulics. And now, what might be tough for the team is they might say, "Well, if we don't have the hydraulics, we won't be able to do parkour anymore. It's going to be difficult in that." And it's like, okay, it's not that important. And sometimes that can be the problem, is that you like a certain functionality so much that you just get locked into it, and the engineers refuse to do anything else that doesn't have that capability, and then it's like, we look, guys, you got to move ahead.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's one thing that Jobs was pretty good, and even Cook, is that as Apple products moved ahead, they threw out requirements that everyone thought absolutely had to be in there,
Right.
and like a lot of it was getting rid of RS-232 ports, and then just going with USB. And I was like, "What? Our computers will never work without those things." It's like, it's too big and too bulky, and just taking that thing out and slimming everything down. And then also the phone jack, just
Yeah.
taking that thing out.
Right.
And it was like, "No, you got to have it in there. It's absolute requirement." And it's like, no, it's like, at some point you got to move on. You leave that phone jack in there, the thing will never be waterproof. Which
So,
requirement do you want? Do you want it to be waterproof, or do you want to have that phone jack in there?
so
So yeah, it just kind of goes on and on like that, and that's sometimes what will be really tough, is that
right.
is to realize that in order to get something that's better, there may be some functionality that you are going to sacrifice, but in the end, you never really need it.
Right. So you also got involved in a conversation on X the other day about the definition of useful. And I thought that would be
This will
useful
work. Yeah.
for us to
Mhm.
talk about what is, because, now the definition, I think, is going to vary from company to company. You and I think, talked about this 2 weeks ago. It could be that this Chinese company says, look, we need the revenue. We need to start selling something. And so it's useful enough. We're going to start selling it. Somebody else may say, "Oh, we want to get to a certain level before we actually put this on
Right.
the
So
market."
so when it comes to useful work, it's going to be the customer that decides that. And what they're looking at is that we have operations on the floor that are currently being done by humans.
Right.
We don't want to reconfigure or change anything. We're not going to spend any money in putting in new tooling or anything else. This has to come in and be able to do the same work that the humans do, and do it in the same cycle time, same reliability, same quality, and the same endurance. So it has to be able to make it through a whole shift, and it has to be able to show up the next day and the next day and the next day, and not have like an expensive preventive maintenance. So that's like, as far as like the requirement of doing the work. Okay. And what then ends up making it useful is it has to do it at cost parity. So the cost of operating the bot cannot exceed that of the human wage for doing the same thing. So long as it's just as productive, and it doesn't matter what the task is. I'm not talking about it has to do every task in the
Right.
factory.
Right.
There just has to be somewhere on the floor some low hanging fruit, things that are easy enough that the bot can actually execute it without compromising anything on the operation of the factory by either being too slow or having poor quality or damaging things or anything else, or requiring 3 other workers to come over and constantly mind it. So, you're going to be a little bit concerned of how autonomous is going to be at first. And it's going to come down to either, and it's going to be a robot as a service kind of model anyways. I don't think it's going to be, oh, I buy the bot, I go over there, and it costs me this much in electricity and maintenance and depreciation that's on this thing, and the fact that I got a guy sitting there looking at him working all day. Okay. And am I paying that guy? What am I paying that guy? So you've got to do that cost calculation, and if it turns out to be all right, then it's there. So that's the complex part of the calculation. But as far as the definition, I think it's very straightforward. Same work as any human, or at or less than the cost. Now, if it turns out that it's a robot as a service model, and they say, oh, $10 an hour, that's what you have to pay for the
Right.
bot.
Right.
And then you might be able to say, well, that's fine. Okay, that's it. And so long as there's, like I said, there's no other weird things I have to do that I need to have another person there, or do any sort of maintenance, that's all on whoever the provider is, then that'll make sense. Now, you may not really see it unless you get some sort of quantities, because you can imagine there's going to be a robot wrangler involved in there somewhere. And if it's like 1-to-1, that's going to be expensive, because you're not even going to be paying the robot wrangler minimum wage. It's going to be higher because it's a higher skilled kind of job. So it's going to have to be that we can see that there are 10 operations, or an operation that typically needs 10 workers, and we'll do it now with 10 bots. But we'll have one human sort of supervising the whole thing, just making sure everything is being done right. And then you would be able to say, okay, that makes sense. It's saving me money. So in the end, it's a bottom line calculation. Putting that human bot in there reduce my cost or increase. If it reduced it, it's doing useful work. Now, it could be strange in some cases that you might need 2 bots to do the work of 1 human. But if those 2 bots are doing it at a cost that's half of the human, then, okay, then you can go ahead and say that, again, there's kind of a cost parity.
Yeah. And I think, again, you've been heavily involved in putting in various kinds of robotics and other kinds of equipment to speed up the workflow, or to change or to get rid of employees, if you will. The automation equipment that you put in, I'm just guessing that it's not always exactly about whether you're going to get this a better rate than the human. In other words, I know that when I was analyzing it, sometimes it's, am I going to get a better rate than if I send it to China?
Yeah,
so can I make it in the United
exactly.
States?
At the end of the day, it's like, are you able to reduce your costs? So there's a couple of things you're looking at. Is that one is that you've got a certain throughput. So you know that you need to design this equipment to do a certain throughput, and how costly is that going to be? The other is quality, because the last thing you want are returns. And then the other thing is that you got to make sure that the production is going to have good uptime the whole time, that it's not going to be unreliable and constantly go down and need all sorts of maintenance. So a lot of those calculations go, in the end of the day is that you're producing a product cheaper than you were able to do it before. And the automation that goes in is, there's a lot of engineering that kind of goes into it. So sometimes something seems really simple and you just be amazed all the steps that are involved in there and all the engineering that has to go through. And you are employing a lot of people to figure out how to do that, which is really where, a bulk of that cost goes to, and keeps those people, employed, as opposed to people actually. And then there are the people who have to run it. So none of these things are lights out kind of operation. There are still people that have to go through and do maintenance and servicing and everything else. In some cases, actually working side by side with the automation. But yeah, there's always going to be a calculation of, is this keeping me competitive? It's not keeping me competitive. We're not a charity.
It's right.
We just don't put the robots in there because we feel sorry for them. We're putting them in there because they're going to reduce costs.
So the other piece of news that I saw last week, and maybe it was the same day or whatever, but Toyota joined the robot revolution. Toyota showed us a very cuddly robot that was all clothed up in all kinds of soft fabrics. So what did you think of Toyota's initial entry into the business?
It's one of those things that they're looking at what's going to be the final market, and I guess this best term is they're getting ahead of their skis.
Okay.
That's not where I'd focus my energy right now, because they're going to do that, and that's just going to be a gimmick for the next 15 years. And there was just going to be it's like one of those Tamagotchi little robot dogs or something like that. They're just like trying to get into that market. I'm not sure that it's going to be successful at home unless they've made some big discovery no one knows about. So again, that was one of the problems with the Honda Asimov robot is that it was more a pure R&D project just to see what they could do, that they could make something as walking and a humanoid. And, they gave, full degrees of freedom, and the fingers, the hands were very good, but it was very expensive. It could even play the piano and entertain people. And it was like a lot of heuristic code. In the end, it was like, well, what's the business case? What's it good for? Is it just supposed to be a party trick? It was just seemed to be mostly what it was. Is like it was used to entertain dignitaries that would come to some conference that Honda was sponsoring or something like that. But in the end, it's like, is it going to be functional in the factory to able to do anything? And it wasn't. It was designed for the wrong purpose. And Toyota might be making the same mistake. And they need to think about you've got to get utility out of it now.
Yeah.
So don't over design it. Just design it for that. And yes, it's really attractive, but it would sort of be like IBM back in the 1950s saying, "Oh, we're going to build these computers for use in the home now."
Right.
It's like,
Right.
first,
Yeah.
people didn't see a need for it in the home, and second is like, there's no way you could scale it down. You can get the cost and everything else. Is the way you get to the IBM PC is through all those IBM mainframes that these Fortune 500 companies were paying for years and years, because there was utility to them, immediate utility, that they could justify the cost of these big things. But I don't see, there'll be some early adopters, people with nothing but time and money on their hands, that might buy that, but I don't see it as a business case.
So James Dalma took a ride around Pasadena
Mhm.
yesterday with Bradford Ferguson and with the new FSD 12. And so I'm not bringing it up because of FSD 12 for cars, although you can certainly speak to that if you want to. But for me, watching that made me think, wow, if it's this good with an automobile, how fast and how amazing will it be with a bot? Did it hit you the same way that this is
Yeah.
breakthrough in terms of how the bot can be trained?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't wait to get my hands on V11 to see how it compares to what I'm used to and some of the roads I have around here. But watching James' description of that, he's like having, let's say, the same issues in his neighborhood that I have. It's like, these narrow little streets with poor line markings, and they're just not something that's typically in the training set, and it being very hesitant, and him saying, "Oh, it's just smooth and buttery everywhere." That it just does it, acting very human like. And yeah, that tells you that they're onto the right kind of approach to solving these end-to-end problems, and that they've been able to train it pretty well. Now, Elon did mention, he followed up and some of the commentary that James had on X about that, they're kind of still compute constrained right now.
Right.
But that's going to end very soon, which means it's probably just going to ramp really quickly. And then when they are no longer compute constrained, then I imagine they can start doing also a lot more with Optimus. But what we're seeing everywhere in general is people making big strides in the end-to-end area for all the humanoid bots. So I'm pretty bullish that we're going to see some rather amazing things by the end of this year, if not sooner than that, where you just get another announcement. Because it's one of those, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop right now. It's like, it's been rather quiet this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. Every time I have you on this afternoon, there will be 15 new videos.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So,
exactly. What do you think I was trying to delay the taping of this? It's like, I have no idea something might be coming. So
no, I thought we should go ahead and do it every Wednesday, because we get to kind of review. And also, I think what people miss in those breaking news stories is the deep analysis. And that's what I want to try to do with this Wednesday. Now, if there's breaking news, great. But once we have the breaking news, now we have to put it into some kind, like you said, you just were needing to send something over to connecting the dots. Well, that's part of what this channel does too, is try to connect the dots. I know that's part of what you want to do. It really doesn't matter how cute and clever something is. It's okay, what is the impact that's going to have?
What's it showing? What's it showing?
On the subject matter, on the entire subject matter of robotics, but also specifically on Tesla. And then ultimately, for a lot of people that watch this channel, what's the impact going to be on the stock? When is the street going to say, oh yeah, I mean,
and they're starting to notice. We're seeing glimmers that different financial analysts are starting to look at it to see how to evaluate it, to understand it a bit better. ARC has already sort of started in that area, that they they had an interview with Brett Adcock, I think a couple months ago, before the one that Herbert and I had. And so they were studying that space and looking at it and beginning to understand it. And they announced on their website that they are one of the companies that invested in that round.
Right.
So, they're looking at it and they're seeing it. Now, a lot of people say, well, ARC is kind of sometimes an outlier or ahead of the game, but at the same time, others are going to be paying attention. Other hedge funds are probably looking at that. And of course, the other thing is, like, it wasn't like ARC was the only investor. There was a bunch of other VCs in there that had, much bigger shares and everything else. So that means it's grabbing the attention of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that those are some of the takeaways from it, is that how it impacts it. And again, when we see a bot from China that's walking 7 miles per hour,
Yeah.
It doesn't mean Optimus is going to be walking 7 miles per hour tomorrow. But what it means is that it is possible for a humanoid bot to do it.
Right.
And evidently without maybe a whole lot of effort. The thing is, we don't know. It's like, okay, what's the runtime on that going to be? Is it drain the battery in half an hour and everything like so these other things? But it's showing us that from the first principles approach, is like, yeah, it can be done, and it looks like it's being done without as much effort and energy as you would think. And then you'll see, another example of like, Sanctuary coming out with the hand picking really quickly, and it's showing it's like, yeah, we can develop these nets that can make the decision logic and what to do, that it's not hesitating, it's just going ahead and going around doing stuff.
Right.
And it's probably the same thing with like, V12 of FSD, is that V11 was hesitant because it couldn't make up its mind.
Right.
And now V12 was like, yeah, I got this. I know exactly what to do. I understand the whole situation of what's going on. So the V11, I think partly because it was heuristic, and maybe there's just some other things in there.
Yeah.
As soon as it got a piece of data that it didn't like, its first impression was like, just stop the car. I don't know what to do. And whereas V12 is like, sees what's happening. There's an expectation. So and one of the examples that James had is his narrow roads where you go through it all curvy and uphill, is that people around there are always going for walks. There's no sidewalks or anything like that. And so you got to deal with the fact that you have to share the road with the people who are going for a walk. Mm-hmm. And V11 will just freak out. It's like, as soon as it sees a pedestrian, it's like, I got to stop. And it'll just do it really abruptly. Whereas V12 is just like, oh, I see those people. I see they're not in front of the car, that they're kind of getting over to the side. It slows down a little bit, but it just goes really smooth, exactly the way a human does. Yeah. And that's partly because it's able to forecast what's about to happen better than V11, where I think V11, if a person was walking and suddenly, went to grab for their cell phone or something like that, it took that as like a threat right away. It's like, oh, the person's like, their kinematics is saying they're turning and they're ready to go jump in front of the car. And it's like, no, they're not. We all know that because we can read the body language a little bit better. So that's what it seems like, is that you're beginning to see those glimmers. And if it's working like that for V12, then it's going to be great when it has embodied in a humanoid, where again, it has this rich understanding of what's going on in the world because it understands physics,
right,
and is able to sort of be more predictive of what's going on and understand what the next move has to be, and start playing chess 4 or 5 moves ahead, as opposed to 1 move at a time, which is what seems like a lot of them are doing right now. They're just like, oh, I'll just take this move and now let's see what the consequences are. It's like, oh my God, I didn't expect him to do that. It's like, of course everyone knew that was the next move your opponent's going to do. So when they start looking at it like that, and forecasting more in the future, be better. And that's, again, like what Sora showed with the videos, that's more or less what we're talking about, is that kind of prediction of the future, is that you see what's going on in your environment right now, and you have some prompts of what should happen, and you now create a video that this is how this whole scenario is going to play out now.
Yes.
And then you start to execute to that. And if the execution doesn't fit what was just imagined literally by the neural net, then it'll do mid-course correction or do something else. Sure. And so because of that, it seems like it will have less hesitancy and be a lot more confident when it goes to do something.
All right, Scott. Well, that was my whole list. We went down the entire thing, and I think it's exciting. I think it's extremely exciting. I think maybe we'll be surprised by how fast we actually start seeing some of these things. I know that Amazon's got them in the workplace. I know that we've seen them putting the decal or the ornament on the hood of a car. adjusting or making sure that the seatbelt strap was correct. I mean, yeah, we've seen some modest attempts at work in the factory, but I think maybe we're pretty darn close to seeing some very significant work in the factory, and we'll be looking forward to that. So until next Wednesday, thank you as always for coming on and helping out here on the channel, and
Sure.
all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.
Yep. Till next Wednesday.